go over trapping real quick. So this is the trapping lecture that you're watching right now. So let's talk a little bit about active versus passive hunting. Active hunting is going out, tracking, stalking, ambushing an animal. The problem with that is you can waste a lot of calories, depending on the environment, of course, and the way that you're hunting. But you're using some sort of tool to kill the animal, or you're trying to flush them into an area so that they fall into a trap. But the idea is there is caloric expenditure. Now, yes, you can set back and try to ambush an animal, but most forms of active hunting, you're going to be out tracking, stalking, like our ancestors did, and try to, if there's more than one of you, try to use team-based hunting to run this animal down, or to use teamwork to funnel them into a trap. Now, passive hunting is setting up traps. You're trying to increase your odds by setting up multiple traps in different areas that you know animals traditionally move around or move through to get food. So what are some examples of active hunting? And they're not limited to this. I'm just trying to give you some ideas. Throwing spear would be one of the most basic. Bow and arrow, we're stepping up a little bit in advancement. Another really basic one would be a throwing stick. So think of a boomerang. So not like what you would see in the movies. A traditional boomerang did not come back to the Aboriginals. It was designed so that the weight of the stick, even though it was cut so that it would cut through the air, it was aerodynamic, it did not return back to the hunter like you see on TV. But the aerodynamic edge was also used to concentrate a lot of force from the weight of the stick into a smaller area to do more damage. So think of if you got hit by a 2x4 and you got hit by the 4-inch side, but you flip that over and then you get hit with the 2-inch side, the 2-inch side is going to do more damage with the same amount of force because it concentrates all that force in a smaller area. Same idea behind a throwing stick. And then you have an atlatl, which is taking a stick to extend the length of the arm to get more leverage so that you can throw they call them darts, but they are huge. They're a lot bigger. They're probably twice, sometimes 3 times the size of a bow and arrow, or an arrow for a bow. An atlatl dart is huge, and it's meant to bring down large game. So back when our ancestors were hunting, they needed large tools to bring down larger game, and that's what the atlatl dart was designed for. So it's not going to go as far, but with that extension of the arm, with the handle from the atlatl to throw the dart, they could throw it further than they could with just their arm alone, plus get more force behind it. A bola throwing sling is you have weighted objects at the end of these ropes. They circle them over their head, then they aim them towards an animal's limbs so that it wraps those limbs up, wraps their legs up, keeps them bound up until they can get over to the animal and kill it, or at least slows them down. Now, it can be used to wrap around the head and knock the animal unconscious, but traditionally a bola is made to wrap up the legs so that the animal is slowed down at least enough so that the hunter can go over and kill the animal. A sling would be like David versus Goliath, right? He puts this rock in a sling, circles it over his head, he releases it, and sends that projectile flying. Another basic hunting implement that you can, with practice, get pretty accurate with. And then you have a fishing pole. You don't think of that as active hunting because you're just sitting down, but you are actively trying to lure the fish. You can use it, a fishing pole with a hook, as a primitive form of passive hunting to increase your odds by using like a spring snare, which we'll talk about in just a second, which we've also already done in class. So seining, cast nets, They are two separate things, but they both rely on nets. That's the reason I combined them. A seine would be like a net between two poles where two people walk down through a river. It's got weights at the bottom so that the fish or aquatic animals can't get underneath. And then they seine over to one bank to the next and then dump out their catch. A casting net is one central net that cinches up. So when the person throws it out, they have a rope that cinches the net up. It has weights at the end, so when it hits the water, the weights go to the bottom. They cinch it up with that rope once it impacts and then or goes to the bottom, and then it catches small bait fish. Now, obviously, you can catch larger fish with it. It's traditionally used to catch your bait fish for fishing, but you can use it to catch larger fish. Trot line is a line that is strung up with a bunch of different hooks across a river or a pond or a lake, and then you go and check it ever so often, and it's baited. A gig would be used, it's a 3-point spear, traditionally, and it's used to catch small animals like frogs, like bullfrogs. Noodling or grappling, depending on where you come from, was illegal in Texas, and now it's legal. But you can go up underneath the embankments and look for those large blue catfish, and they get huge. The biggest one we ever caught when I was growing up was 75 pounds, and they get larger than that. I mean, you'll see them 120, 130 is not uncommon for places like East Texas and Louisiana. But it's called noodling, and it's become more popular. But you're looking for large catfish, or even animals, like turtles. But ideally, you're looking for those large catfish in this area. Active and passive hunting. Now, some of these can be used actively and passively. So snares, you can, especially if you're using teamwork, run an animal towards a snare and hope that your snares catch them, so they don't just have to be used for passive hunting. Same thing with weirs. A weir can be a W or an M design or a V design. The idea behind it that it funnels the fish towards a certain area that you've got blocked off, and then you go close the funnel, and then you can essentially noodle for them along the embankment and throw them up on the banks. And that can be used passively, where you can just set it up and walk off, or you can set it up, go upriver or upstream, and then walk down to it and try to funnel fish that you're scaring in that direction to go inside that weir and hide. Same thing with seines and cast nets. Seine can be set up on a river or a stream and just walk off, or you could walk down the stream and try to actively hunt with it. And then pits, just digging a pit, running an animal towards that pit, can be used to capture animals, like especially small pigs. You dig it deep enough. Pigs aren't really good at climbing, and as long as you've got good right angles on your trap, so you don't want any kind of angle where they can run up it and attempt to jump out. It needs to be square right angles so that they fall into the pit. The top of the pit is covered, just like you see in the movies. You run them towards it, and then they fall in it. That can be done actively, but it can also be set up passively. But you got to be careful with pits, because you could get trapped in it yourself if you forget where you set up your pits. Primitive trapping. So we're just using what's around us. So if we have a digging implement, we can dig a pit. If we have limbs that are around, we can make weirs, we can make bird traps. The idea is it doesn't require a lot of caloric expenditure, because the more traps we make, the better we increase our odds. So the best time to construct these traps are at night, so that you don't waste your daytime when you need to be doing other things. You do it at night to keep your mind occupied and to keep your mental strength up, because if you have small tasks to do, you don't think of the situation that you're in. You're thinking of the task at hand, and it gives you something to increase your chances of getting food. So it keeps your mind occupied, saves calories, and you can stay stationary and then go out and check your traps. It's best to check your traps 2 times at least a day and combine it with other activities. We'll talk about that in a second. So More traps, better odds, increasing your odds. And then purpose of trapping, passive form of hunting. It can also be used actively. More traps, increase odds. We're looking for macronutrient-rich foods, primarily protein and fats. So your ketogenic diet. A lot of the animals that we're trapping are not going to be high in carbohydrates, but we're going to get a lot of protein, a lot of fats. And this is what a lot of anthropologists think helped us develop these larger brains than other hominids, is because we were able to go out, use all these tools, and procure this food, which gave us the ability to get all these calories in, and we had more nutrient-rich food, mainly with the big primary macronutrients, giving us more time to do other things. They really think this is the difference between us and Neanderthals. A lot of hominids, the reason they're not around, especially Neanderthals, is that they were so specialized in their form of hunting that when that hunting went away, they didn't adapt, where Homo sapiens did. So a good example of that would be Neanderthals went out and they used atlatls. They had these tools. They brought down large game. They had these large spears. But when that large game started to disappear, so did Neanderthals, except for the ones that interbred with Homo sapiens. And then Homo sapiens, when their form of hunting went away, they moved out to the coastlines and started fishing. They had all these different variations of procuring food. Not only did they hunt, but they foraged. They had a lot of different ways to bring in calorically rich foods, and they succeeded. That's the theory. We have no guarantee on that. That's just what we think happened, and that's what we see in the archaeological record. Types of traps, crushing traps. So you have deadfalls. Got to be careful with those because you can get bacterial infection or bacterial contamination in the rest of the meat. So if you leave them there too long and there was damage to the internal organs, especially the intestines, that bacteria can leach out and get into the meat and poison the person eating the meat. Strangulation traps, some forms of snares will strangle the animal and kill it. Some will capture their legs to keep them from running away. So they don't always have to strangle the animal. It depends on the type of snare used. Live traps, so bird traps are a form of live traps. Fishing weirs are a form of live traps. Even using a spring snare as a fishing pole are a form of a live trap. And then you have pit traps are another form of live trap. So deadfalls, figure 4, Paiute, those are the two that we used in class, and they crush the animal. Here's some videos on the deadfall. Here's one video on the Paiute deadfall that you can go in and watch. And the snares that we did in class was a spring snare. It requires cordage. You may have to create your own cordage, or you may have some on your person, like the clothing that you're wearing may have some cordage in it, or you can make it if you can sacrifice some of that clothing. The most common would be the spring snare. That's the reason we used it in class. It can be used for game, even large game, and it can be used for fishing. And if it's going to be used for game, they need to be set up along known game trails to increase your odds. Unless you're going to run the animal towards an area, it needs to be set up on a large game trail for passive hunting. And you can set up multiple fishing poles with small saplings, or you can cut limbs that are flexible, stick them in the mud along the embankment, and set up a fishing pole with a spring snare so that when the fish sets it off, it's just setting the hook. You don't want it to yank the fish out of the water. And this is not something like you see on a cartoon where it yanks the animal up off the ground. It's not what we're looking for. We're just looking for it to cinch the noose down or to set a hook. And if it's an animal that could potentially chew through this snare itself, then yes, you would want it to go around its neck so it can't get to the snare to bite it, or you do want it to be strong enough to pull them up off the ground. That's the only time you would want it to yank the animal up. So let's say a pig has tusks. They can obviously cut through a snare unless it catches their back leg, yanks them up off the ground. Pigs can't turn very well at their neck. So that's the reason when you see people grab a pig, they grab it by the back legs, and then they turn with the pig so the pig can't get them. But a boar is extremely strong and aggressive. We would have to capture small animals. A boar would be too strong. Even a large sow would be too strong for natural cordage usually. So here's some examples of a spring snare for fishing. Arapuca bird trap. That's one that I've made a video. Now, we did all these other snares in class. Arapuca bird trap is a live trap. It requires some cordage, mainly for small game like birds, and it keeps them alive. And you want to make sure that you reach through the top to grab the bird, not through the bottom, or otherwise they could escape. And here's an example of an Arapuca bird trap and how to build it. It gives you the main elements of building the base and how to tie things together and make your triggering mechanism. Fishing weirs, like I mentioned before, are just a funnel. Least demanding trap. We just need some straight sticks or some stones to build a funnel. Often it's going to go in the direction of the current. If it's a pond, then you would build it along the side of the pond so that the weir funnels them in. Normally your W's and your M weirs are used for ponds. Your V weirs are used for like a river current. You can even make a straight weir, but ideally it's better to make it into a V so that the opening of the V where it funnels them in allows the fish to get into an area that you've blocked off where they can't go anymore. And then you close that V off or close the funnel off and you walk in. You are essentially noodling at that point because you put brush along the weir so that the fish will get up underneath that and hide, and that's where you find them because they'll feel safe. Common elements to all weirs. It has a small funnel that funnels fish in. It has a containment area that you've blocked off. So that containment area still needs to allow water to flow through if you're in a river. It's not a big issue if you're in a pond. But rocks work because they'll still let the water current go through. Sticks work even better because you can make the weir openings small enough to let large enough to let water through, but small enough to keep the fish in. And always give the fish a place to hide. So I like to put brush along the edges of my weirs because they'll get up underneath there and feel secure. And here's an example of a fishing weir. So for the skill, I don't care what primitive trap you use to fill out the templates. To make your videos or your illustrations, just pick one. We've done spring snares, you've done deadfalls, and Arapuca bird trap is one that may be new to you. I don't care. You could even do a fishing weir if you wanted to keep it simple. But the deadfalls would be something easy to do at home. The snare would be something easy to do from home if you didn't have time to do this in class. But that's it. That's a simple explanation of a lot of different traps that we discussed in class.